Sports by Brooks on Fancred. On the Fancred mobile streaming app, it is Tuesday before Thanksgiving. Big holiday coming up. Grandkids are coming down from Flagstaff. Nope, we got Thanksgiving right around the corner, but we'll be broadcasting tomorrow. Not letting up. Maurice Clarett will join us, right? Former Ohio State guy, sort of. And he's got an autobiography out, so we'll talk to him about the book, but of course we'll talk football with Maurice Clarett tomorrow, right here on Sports by Brooks on Fancred. Turn everything around, change your plans. For tomorrow, we're here every weekday, noon Eastern time. My producer is, of course, Cam Smith in Boston. And we've got some great guests today. We've got Zach Cox from Nesson. We'll talk Patriots, obviously. And we'll also talk to our old buddy. And I want to drill down on the pronunciation of his last name because I've heard it two ways. Cam Smith, our producer. I don't know if you've heard Vinny doing. Vinny does a lot of guest spots. Vinny Bonsignore or Vinny Bonsignore, right? Athletic guy, previously covering the Rams, now covering the Raiders for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. So he's a great guy to talk to today. Bonsignore, is that what you understand it to be? Because I've actually heard it I've heard him on the radio like twice in the last week doing interviews, sports radio, and I've heard it pronounced. So we're just you got to ask. So we're going to talk to Vinny Bonsignore, Vegas guy now. We're going to find out what are the plans, because he was doing the Rams and the Athletic, and now he's got the Vegas thing. So we got to find out about the logistics. What's going on with Vegas? Is he actually going to move there full time? Well, he's got to move there full time, right? It's a full-time job year round, the NFL, OTAs. So the draft. Brent Musburger lives in Vegas. You have to live in Vegas if you're covering the Raiders. Of course, that begins next year, not this year. Oakland Raiders, terrible performance on Sunday. Last night, Rams, terrible performance. Vinny Bonsignore covered the Rams up until 2 weeks ago? And now he's covering the Raiders. Yay! So this guy, I'm sure Vinny was in New York, or it's not really New York, it's New Jersey, for that bloodbath with the Raiders, which I loved every second of it. Not because I have it in for John Gruden. I just love when the media just has to grasp. Oh, John Gruden. It must be John Gruden. Okay. How many times? And then you've got the Rams. And I told you so. If you've watched this show throughout, you know we've been doing this show like 3 months now. Every single day. We have not missed a day. We have been spot on. And I have told you repeatedly, much to the consternation, I might add, of our guests, that the Rams are not that good. And we found out last night, boy, was Brooks right. Woo! I was right. What a putrid performance. Awful. Completely and totally dominated. And don't let Lamar Jackson's performance fool you. They were dominated up front. That's what creates those opportunities. The Rams are a disaster. Their offensive line doesn't exist. Their defense, to go against a team like the Ravens, is a complete mismatch. They've got undersized linebackers, and you've got the Ravens, who are built like a steamroller. They've got the huge tight ends that they use as blocking, right? And when you have the undersized linebackers focusing on coverage like the Rams, you see what happens. And Aaron Donald, what was going on last? I mean, I know he's getting double teamed, blah, 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 blah. Joe Tessitore and Booger. 5,000 times since 1983, he's been double teamed. Aaron Donald last night didn't look like the Aaron Donald that we normally see. So, but then again, can you blame him after the way that game went? Okay, that's cool. So thanks, Cam, for the update. So let's see here. Let me get back to what we're going to talk about. We actually have something really cool that nobody has. Well, I don't know if I'd call it cool. Let's not overrate it, Brooks. By the way, Cam, you might want to. There's a little back channel to our producer. You might want to space our guys out now if they want to do it. If Vinny wants to space it out to later, go right ahead. Man, that sucks, by the way. So, by the way, coming up, Vinny Bonsignore. We'll talk Raiders and Rams. We'll talk NFL. We'll talk about, is he going to be living at the Wynn or the Tropicana? We're going to find out. Vinny Bonsignore, great guy, by the way, one of the all-time good guys. Maybe I'll bring up the Dean Spanos story. The LA Chargers story that Vinny broke a few weeks ago. I've thought about, Cam, how to do that. Now, here's the thing. I don't even know if Vinny cares, but Vinny Bonsignore came out with a story about a month ago about the Chargers moving to London, that it was a distinct possibility. And Dean Spanos lost his mind, as you remember, much in the way that the Charger fans lost their minds at Dean Spanos in Mexico City. If you saw that here on Fancred, we had the video of them cursing Dean Spanos, screaming at him. So Dean Spanos wants us to believe, oh, there's no chance, and he's dropping F-bombs, and he's really upset. And I don't blame him. I really don't. I'd be under a lot of stress, too, if I had screwed up the way he screwed up. I mean, you talk about an epic screw-up. Holy cow. It's as bad as it gets all around. So, by the way, you can remind our guest about previous guests that she might know that, wow, they came back, that kind of thing. Cam, I'm sure you're already doing that way ahead of me. So, so coming up, I just want to drill down and get to this first story because we just discovered it. But when it comes to our guest today, we'll have Zach Cox in the first hour. Second hour, we will. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Cam. Second hour, we'll have Vinny. All right. I'm like all over the map because we've got things that are kind of breaking right now. I just discovered something really freaking amazing. Let me go back and look at this. All right, hold on. This is amazing. Okay, so this is Sports by Brooks on Fancred. My name is Brooks Melchior. We're live in Los Angeles. Might want to do that at the top of the show, Brooks. And today, we're going to be talking NFL, obviously. I already laid it out. But we've also been covering the Rutgers situation because there's like an insurrection going on. There's a revolt going on with the alumni. Who cares about? I care about Rutgers. I think it's an interesting story. I think it's kind of a funny story, right? And I treat Rutgers the way I treat everything. They're in the Big Ten, okay? Last I checked, at least for now. And I just enjoy it. I love these stories. I love the gossip. I love the intrigue. We've got Greg Schiano. We've got the Penn State. Well, I don't love that part of it. Clearly, that's something I'm going to address, particularly tomorrow. We're going to talk about what Scott Paterno, the son of the late Joe Paterno, said about me. I'll mention it today, but we're going to address that tomorrow because the son of the late Joe Paterno, came after me, screaming at me on Twitter yesterday, in case you missed it. If you're wondering if we've still got some juice over here, oh yeah. All I did was a couple of little garden variety tweets about Jerry Sandusky and Penn State. I've sent out 10,000 tweets about Penn State over the years. Paterno, Sandusky, all that stuff. Schiano. But this time, the son of Joe Paterno, Scott Paterno, an attorney, went on Twitter and started calling me names and riled up the fan base. Now, understand, in this situation at Penn State, right, the fan base, as it pertains to pushback on, the Sandusky Paterno thing, right? Nothing happened. That is a Paterno State University situation, not a Penn State. It's a Paterno State situation. It's a cult. True believers, led by his family, Scott and Jay Paterno. Jay, of course, the longtime hack assistant coach at Penn State. Amazing how Jay, didn't gain any consideration for that head coaching position. Instead, they went with Bill O'Brien. Weird, isn't it? Not really. So I was attacked by a member of the Paterno family yesterday. I gleefully retweeted it. The best part of that situation, and I've got a long history with the Paterno family. Back when all the stuff hit the fan, you remember, I'll give you one example. I want to give you one example. My kind of brush with Scott Paterno, big fat guy, lobbyist, actually, in the state of Pennsylvania, at the legislative level. He's a lobbyist. And Scott Paterno, lawyer, attorney, legal expert, right? So you would think if I'm out there and I'm, half cocked, making stuff up, boy, I could be in trouble. No. There's literally nothing you can say, right, to Scott Paterno about Sandusky and what his dad did in helping to manage the situation. Scott can delude himself all he wants, but you could say whatever you want. You could say, Jerry Sandusky is an alien, right? And he's not going to do anything. Or you could say Joe Paterno, his father, he's not going to do anything, committed crimes. Scott's not going to do anything, the lawyer's son, because he knows if you get into a court case, wow, we've got discovery. Oops. And this time, there's not going to be a cover-up in the trial. Everybody was covering I remember the trial with Sandusky. I covered it very closely. I was out front of the story. I'll give you a great example here in a second of what I broke and what Scott Paterno did at the time, right before Joe Paterno died. But I was in touch with a lot of people. I still know a lot of people in that area close to the Penn State situation. And I can tell you for a fact that there were members of that prosecution, the prosecuting attorneys, right, who were big Penn State people who soft pedaled the prosecution against Sandusky. Period. I could tell you that for a fact. I reported it at the time. That's why Jerry Sandusky isn't, breaking rocks at Leavenworth where he should be. I mean, they just brought him in to re-sentence him. What the hell is that? 30 to 60 years. What? Right. Nobody says anything. Nobody protests. Wasn't it funny, by the way? It's bad. It's sick and tragic when Sandusky goes back to the courthouse this week. He was at the courthouse this week, I believe. If it wasn't this week, it was like Friday. And there's nobody there. Nobody cares. right? No protesters, no people out there shaming him for the horrific crimes. I mean, you're talking about 6 decades of the worst possible crimes, in my opinion, you can commit. Let me explain. If you commit murder and you keep committing murder, you're going to get caught. It doesn't matter who you're murdering. Now, you can murder homeless people, disenfranchised people, but eventually a body is going to turn, something's going to happen, right? So if you're going to commit murder, at least there's that situation, that possibility, right? And the prospects of getting away with it, unless you're mentally ill, not good, at least in your mind. You know it isn't good. On the other hand, think about a horrific crime that you could commit against a disenfranchised, utterly defenseless, anonymous person, and know you're going to get away with it over and over and over again for 60 years. That's what Sandusky did. And that crime, well, it involves children, right? That's the worst crime you could commit. The most cowardly thing you could ever do. Because I mean, even if you're not this mythic god that Sandusky was, isn't it interesting, I might add, the mythic god, right, of central Pennsylvania, Jerry Sandusky, Rutgers wouldn't hire him to be the head coach, but nobody knew anything, right? Jerry Sandusky won the national title twice for Penn State because of his defense. And if you're old enough to remember watching Penn State, Shane Conlon play Miami, you know what I'm talking about. It was Sandusky, the genius of Jerry Sandusky, but he can't get hired. Can't get a job. Okay. Got it. Nobody knew. All right. This is Sports by Brooks on Fancred. I wanted to get that out, by the way. What Sandusky did and what makes what Paterno did so much worse and diabolical is if Sandusky was out, and God knows he probably did murder some kids. How would you know? Because he's preying on the anonymous children who are completely and utterly helpless and dependent on society to protect them, right? The most vulnerable of us all. And the fact that Paterno participated, in my opinion, in perpetrating those crimes, not necessarily participated in the crimes themselves, but he managed the situation, enabled the situation, facilitated literally the situation. And it's amazing. I was just looking back through after I was, just let me know, Cam, about what's going on. Cam Smith, our producer today here on Sports by Brooks on Fancred. A little comunicado here. Back channeling about our guest coming up. Zach Cox of Nesson will join us here shortly. And it'll be cool. We'll go back up to Boston, where we're always in Boston every single day with the show, of course, emanating out of the Fancred HQ. But also we've got that Boston market, that New England market locked down. So, but getting back to the situation, I'm so glad that I'm able to do this show and give you my thoughts on it, the nuance of it, because you really can't convey it on paper, text, black and white. There has to be a certain injection of emotion in this situation. And that's lacking. That's lacking in the way it's presented by the media, period. So that's what we're bringing to you. not screaming and yelling emotion, right? But in the way that I just described to you, why the crimes that Sandusky committed and were enabled by Paterno, in my opinion, actively enabled, right? Managed. And I could go chapter and verse on that. I might tomorrow, maybe. We're going to invite all the Penn Staters and the Paterno Staters and all the Paterno sycophants onto the show tomorrow. I'm going to go on to Twitter and say, come on down, because they're still all over me 72 hours later. So that's what we may do tomorrow. That'll be chaos if that happens, because you got to go to my Twitter mentions over the last 3 days. I just did a couple of tweets and people went nuts. But we're conveying these things to you. Nobody else is. And I never thought that I would be back on this, that I would be back talking about it, right? And I'm only talking about it in the context of Schiano, which is amazing when you consider what's happening at Rutgers. I talked about Rutgers a second ago because that's what I want to get to. I want to get to that clip now, Cam. Clip number 4, I believe it is. This is amazing. So I think this was yesterday. Yesterday, from what I can tell, at a hotel conference room, there was a reunion of Rutgers alumni football players. That's what I think this is, because it's this video that you're about to see. You're about to see. Boy, this is really a big setup, isn't it? The video you're about to see here is of Chris Christie, former governor of New Jersey, the guy that closed off the George Washington Bridge. You remember that, right? Of course, then lied about it, said he didn't, got away with it, of course. The guy who wears pants up to his neck. And when we show you this clip in a second, be prepared. You might just want to turn away from the screen. Just listen. You're going to want to listen. But so here's Chris Christie, the former governor of the state of New Jersey, talking to what I think are Rutgers former football players. This video was posted 18 hours ago. It is nowhere. It's nowhere. It's here. Sports by Brooks on Fancred. This is the kind of thing, Cam, that this is the kind of thing that we need to roll out here shortly. But here's the thing. We do it on this show first. We're not going to do it. I'm not going to do it on Twitter. If I'm breaking news, I'm going to do it here. I had the same philosophy about the website. I did it on the website. Listen, is Twitter what it is? Yes. It's significant. Yes. Is it going to be around forever? I don't even know. Stick to what you do best and focus on yourself. Now, obviously, you got to, if you're working for people or you got to make money or something's going on with advertising and you have to use a certain medium, fine. But all things being equal, right? If you've got a website, you got a show, focus on that. Break the news there first. Don't become a function of Twitter. That's bullshit. I've always felt that way from the very beginning. And we're going to get to the Christie clip in here in a second, but it's amazing that people have this idea. And I'll give you an example. Sports blogs. Wow, sports blogs, that's dead. The business is dead. It once was this amazing business model that generated all this revenue, but now, into the ether. And now it's all about Twitter, social media, Instagram, stories, or whatever. Everything I break, well, I'm not going to break it on my own website. I'm not going to break it on the venue where my employer resides. No. I'm going to give it to Twitter and Jack Dorsey, right? And, But there's an idea out there, just as an example, that sports blogs, that industry has gone downhill because now everybody's on Twitter and social media, and that's where they get all bull crap. The content that is on those sports blogs sucks. It's not compelling. It's not proprietary, or whatever. The big lead, by the way, since they were just sold to Minute Media, whatever that is, they've revamped it. Now, all of a sudden, they're doing all kinds of stuff. And that's why we're having Bobby Burek on and Ryan Glass-Steagall on. So I'm saying all this stuff in relation to this Christie clip. Nobody has it. So what did I do? I discovered this clip about 15 minutes beforehand. Let's just run the clip first. Now, this is a little lengthy. It's not that long. But so this is Chris Christie talking to former Rutgers players yesterday about something that everybody's pissed about at Rutgers right now. Greg Schiano doesn't look like is going to get hired at Rutgers. There's a very good reason why people are pissed. So this is Chris Christie. That's the voice you'll hear. And by the way,
for me and my
enjoy the photo.
Doing well. So, I defended it. A lot of people didn't like it. Listen, I don't know what I've read because I'm not on the inside anymore. But when a coach is demanding an 8-year guarantee from a public institution and $34 million, and then
shut the hell up.
Says, on top of it, I want private air travel for me and my family for the entire 8 years. If I determine that the travel has anything to do with
it's a limited number of hours.
Sorry, he's not Bear Bryant. He's not Urban Meyer. He's an unemployed.
And we're going to make sure he never is, right?
Who now wants the taxpayers in the state of New Jersey to pay for his private air travel. The governor doesn't get private air travel.
Right. That's not the taxpayers.
I flew commercial all the time.
It's not the taxpayers.
For him to demand that not only for himself, but for
what
his
a
family,
liar, Christie.
You got to draw the line somewhere.
Can you stop that clip for a second?
Very hard.
Can you just stop
in
the
the
clip
governor's
for a
office,
second?
and the chairman of the board of governors came to me and said, "Okay, we got this deal with Schiano, and here's what it is." And even the $4.25 million a year places him in the top half of the coaches in the Big Ten. That's fine. 8 years guaranteed, no matter what happens.
He's just going to keep going on with the lies and the exaggerations.
But the public, when the public heard broadly that the Rutgers football coach is getting taxpayer, at least in part, funded.
I can't even contain myself here. I'm triggered now. I'm always triggered.
Private air travel for he and his family.
Chris Christie is
based on his determination.
Now we know.
Whether it's related to Rutgers or not.
This is amazing.
I couldn't. If I were governor at the time where it has to bless that,
right.
I would have a hard time with that. And as somebody sitting on the outside and knowing how this stuff works from the inside, here's what I think. I don't think he wanted the job. Because when you start making demands like that,
and then he makes this up.
They go
like
from
Kaepernick.
5 years to 8 years.
This is unbelievable, Cam.
They go from $3.5 million to $4.25 million a year. They go from 75% of it is guaranteed to 100% of it is guaranteed.
Chris Christie killed this hire. Now we know.
And say, yeah, but I want private air travel for me and my family for the entire 8 years.
That's a limited number of hours, and it's donated
new football building
by alumni.
By 2023.
Not taxpayer funded, nor are the facilities.
Buyout to leave the contract with go zero, so he can leave to go someplace else without any penalty.
Amazing.
The reason why they don't do that is not that maybe they don't need a new football building by 2023.
There he is.
But if you promise him that, then he doesn't have to outraise the money.
This is
Part of
crazy.
what he's motivated to do is to go out and tell the donors, hey, I need this new building to recruit better players. But I can't ask tuition players to pay the entire.
Cam, you can cut this clip. This is the biggest load of rubbish I've ever heard. And Chris Christie clearly killed the hire. Clearly. No longer the governor. Doesn't know jack shit about how it works in college sports, in the Big Ten at least. Right? Listen, That air travel is not taxpayer funded, period. Right? Everything he is talking about, Chris Christie, right there, is a total misrepresentation of the facts. And it's clear to me now that Chris Christie, of all people, played a role. We've got the video. We've got the audio. We're the only ones. You're going to start to see this. But this is where it all started. So now it's time to shift gears, and we're going to talk NFL and go out and chat with friend of the show now. I guess if you're on for a second time, that means you're a friend of the show. Zach Cox of Nesson joins us, and excited to have him. Now, do people just call it Nesson? Does anybody ever call it? It's the New England Sports Network. Does that ever happen anymore?
Very rarely. Only when I do radio appearances with people outside of New England, essentially. Sometimes we'll get New England Sports Network. Sometimes we'll get NESN. But yeah, right. New England, it's just straight up Nesson.
Or NESN. So, like, I'm over 50. So I'm the guy who's the over 50 crowd. We're most likely to go with the long thing, right? Professional broadcasters, New England. Or we have to say the same thing 4 different ways. We can't just say the same thing. So sorry about that. I digress. I've always kind of like, since I don't live up there, I don't know how they approach that situation. So as an outsider, as someone who follows the team and has followed the team much like NFL fans and media has over the years, but isn't there day to day. The Patriots this year, even though, I mean, the record is as good as it gets, regardless, but there's something about the team this year that just feels different, just to me, following the team. It's like a weird light around what's going on, especially with Brady. So what are your thoughts on that? Am I totally off base, or is it different for you, a guy who has covered the team a lot of years and has been there?
No, I don't think you're off base at all. This feels like a very different Patriots team than the ones we've seen for really the last 15 years almost, just because of the way that it's constructed, where this is a defensive team, this is a special teams team, this is not an offensive juggernaut, which is, I mean, for most of this Tom Brady, Bill Belichick era, we're used to seeing Patriots teams that are explosive offensively and then either bad defensively or at the very best kind of underrated defensively, and the defense is never the kind of calling card of these Patriots teams. But
very
year,
interesting.
I mean, you look at what they've been able to do this year. They've won 3 games this year without scoring 20 points. They haven't done that since 2003, which was the last year where really this Patriots team was a defensive team. I mean, if you remember back in those early years of the Patriots dynasty, those were not offensive teams. Those were Ty Law, Willie McGinnis, Teddy Bruschi, right. All of those great defensive players. And then Tom Brady didn't really kind of come into his own and take over the team until around 2004, 2005. So this is definitely much more reminiscent of those early dynasty teams where the offense isn't really there. I mean, it's not a bad offense. I think they still do have a lot of quality offensive pieces, especially Tom Brady, even if Tom Brady doesn't look like MVP Tom Brady anymore. But this is a defensive team now, and it's something that we haven't seen in a long time. And I think it's something that Tom Brady is kind of still getting used to when you listen to a lot of his public comments. He's not used to being the second fiddle on his own team.
So this is the irresponsible talk show host making stuff up, conspiracy theory things. But and I'm not saying Bill Belichick's leaving after this year. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen with Brady. They might not know right now. But as I look at Belichick, and I'm it's very, very difficult to read the guy, obviously. But in a way it isn't, because he shows so little emotion that when he shows just a little, well, that's kind of obvious, right? When he's smiling, when he never smiles. My thought is you're laying it out right there. It really sounds to me like Belichick is, I mean, all of a sudden, Bill's got the pen out and the pen on the paper, right? And Bill's got a big smile on his face at the press conference after the game before last, but then Tom's all pissed off. It feels like the groundwork is being laid for Bill Belichick to take over this team maybe, this is me now, pass it to the son. You got Gerard Mayo there. This is going to be a defensive team in the future, and Tom Brady's not going to be around in the future. Is that a reasonable, observation that maybe we're seeing, an anticipatory situation with Belichick as he's looking at Brady and what's going to be the future for Tom Brady?
I don't know if I would call it an anticipatory situation, but I will say it's very clear that Bill Belichick loves the way that the Patriots are winning football games right now. He's been a defensive coach for most of his career. The fact that he is now taking on a more hands-on role in the defense, since the Patriots don't have an official defensive coordinator this season, it's kind of been a combination between him, Steve Belichick, and
I mean,
Gerard
what's
Mayo.
that? But to me, that's a tell right there. I mean, isn't that a little weird?
I mean, this was what was expected when Brian Flores left, and then when Greg Schiano left. It was expected that Bill Belichick would take on a greater role defensively. And like I mentioned, he's a defensive coach at heart anyway, so he loves this kind of grind it out, win a game 13.
Now, I'm ignorant.
Football.
I'm ignorant on this. Is this new? What's going on with Bill? And I mean, have the Patriots in the past named one defensive coordinator? Has Bill always kind of been in the middle of it? I mean, is this unprecedented? What they're doing right now?
I wouldn't say it's unprecedented. It's even when they did have actual defensive coordinators, with Matt Patricia here for so long, and Romeo Crennel before that, it's always been Bill Belichick's defense. He always kind of has his fingerprints on it, regardless of who's actually the one with the title. And even Brian Flores last year wasn't the titled defensive coordinator. He was technically the linebackers coach, even though he was calling the defensive plays and everybody knew that he was the defensive
Patriots
coordinator.
way, man. That's the Patriots way. No titles,
that's
right?
What Matt Patricia did in his first year as quote unquote coordinator too. He didn't get the title until his second season. So it's always been kind of a top down thing from the defense with Bill Belichick. So there's not really a lot of change there. I have seen a change in Brady this season, though. Just the way that he's acted in interviews and in post-game press conferences, especially it's been more evident on his radio interviews for most of the season. But it really the one that kind of really spiked up was the post-game press conference after the Eagles game, where coming out of that game, it was the offense wasn't the primary storyline really in that game. It was the defense played really well. They kind of rebounded after that Ravens disaster. The offense still didn't look great, but Mohamed Sanu was getting into the mix a little bit, or N'Keal Harry rather.
9-1. Tom, 9-1.
But then Tom Brady comes out and has his weird kind of mopey press conference, and then the only thing anybody talks about all week was what's wrong with Patriots offense and why does Tom Brady hate this?
You're
Patriots
9-1.
offense, basically. I think he's like I said. I think it's been an adjustment for him this year, trying to not be the explosive offense that they've been in the past. I think he now recognizes that and is trying to remedy that a little bit, because the way he's talked within the last week has been a lot more positive, a lot more complimentary of some of the Patriots' younger offensive players, a lot less doom and gloom. He's been more kind of, I'm a team guy in the last couple of weeks, the last couple of days rather. But yeah, it's definitely been that post-game press conference after the Eagles game was the first time I've really ever seen Tom Brady act like that, even after losses. I mean, and that came after a win. So that was a pretty big tell over how he feels about this whole team right now. But again, I do think he's trying to remedy that a little bit with the way he's acted in the last couple of days.
Now let me drill down on what you just said there. That's the first time you've seen him, represent things in what just happened on the field, right? Are you talking about in the context of 9-1 or just in general?
Just the way he came out,
because 9-1 makes it so much worse.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the Patriots are 9-1 and they had just scored a pretty significant win over the team that beat them in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and a team that, even though the Eagles were missing some pieces, they're still a talented team. The fact that he came into the press conference and sort of that was his mindset, especially after hearing Bill Belichick talk about 5 minutes earlier, he was over the moon basically. It was
right. I mean, that was the point I was making earlier.
Yeah, and that was the kind of, and then by him acting like that, it makes the Patriots' offensive struggles all the more kind of relevant in the national media storylines and whatnot. And yeah, it's still not really clear why exactly his mindset has been so different this season. I mean, my read on it is just what I mentioned before, the fact that it's been an adjustment not having that kind of explosive offense around him and not being able to beat teams 35-31 every week. But yeah, it's again, it took some people by surprise, including a lot of us in the media.
We're visiting with Zach Cox of Nesson Covers the Patriots. You guys, by the way, do an unbelievable job. I always see on the Twitter machine, but I see you everywhere. You got the stocking caps and you got all the gear on and the REI stuff going on. I love it.
Getting cold up here.
But I keep going back to the idea. I just remember after the Eagles game, this stuck with me, that you got the Lane Johnson thing going on with Bill Belichick, and then you got he's the Cheshire Cat smiling. Everything's great. It's kind of almost a euphoric Bill Belichick, right? Even when it's subtle, it's profound because he's so down the middle normally. And then the stark contrast of Brady, it just feels like with Brady, that wasn't the sense of resignation. I think what you just mentioned earlier, a minute or two ago, I think that now Brady says, okay, these are the guys, Nikhil, here we go. We got to work here, and we're not going to get Antonio. We're not going to get anybody else. Bill's all about the defense, right? Things, I'm not running the team anymore, or I'm not having that sort of active role. I might be misrepresenting it, by the way. You know more about it than I do. So it just seems like maybe Tom, at that moment, after the Eagles game, said, I'm losing control, and I'm not really, participating in helping us get players here, or I'm not going to get those players. Right? Does that make sense? What I'm trying to communicate?
Yeah. No, I know what you're
like
trying to say.
losing. He's losing the team in a sense.
I understand that. It's not exactly how I view it, because Tom Brady has never really had a very strong pull with.
That's why we have you on, right?
In. I mean, it goes all the way back to Wes Welker and even Lawyer Malloy earlier than that. There's been plenty of times, Logan Mankins, plenty of times where Tom Brady wanted to either bring in a player or keep a player, and the Patriots have gone in a different direction. So that's not really anything new here. And also, I haven't viewed this whole thing, maybe I'm off base here, but I haven't viewed this as a Tom Brady versus Bill Belichick kind of thing, as in there's any kind of conflict there whatsoever. Right. I think Brady is very happy that the defense is playing as well as it is too, and very happy that the special teams has been as playing as well as it has as well. I just think he's more kind of frustrated with the offense and the offensive pieces around him. Now, maybe part of that is we don't have Antonio Brown. Why not? Why did you get rid of this guy? Or why didn't you help kind of me help my weapons? Or why didn't you do something better to replace Gronk? And all of those questions. But I view that more. I don't really view this as a Belichick versus Brady type thing. I know some people have kind of construed it like that, but I think
you're there, dude.
Internal frustration.
You're there. I like to interrupt you every time. You're there. I mean, that's why we're having you on, man.
Yeah.
Because you're there. And so when you say that, now I'm like, well, that's probably what's going on, because I'm not there and I'm not around those guys. It's so important to be there all the time, especially when you're talking about the subtleties involved with guys like Belichick. And it's funny because you were talking about no titles. There's like no identity. There's no individual identities. And that's the way Bill wants it. So it's really kind of a mysterious thing. That's what makes having you on so valuable, because, the uninformed guy throwing things out in LA, he doesn't know anything. It looks that way because I'm processing it like some talk show host who's never played in the NFL. But, I'm projecting on Tom Brady. But so I wanted to ask you, though, because and we don't have to talk about the Netflix thing, but I'm really convinced. I mean, it's so absurd to think that someone who's so detail oriented and has the supposedly close relationship with Kraft would not be, first of all, would not screen what happened on Netflix, and then would not see how people might construe it, that it might be embarrassing. That's number one. I find it impossible to believe, right? And number two is when you're looking at Brady's reaction after the Eagles game, I mean, how else is that going to be construed where he's not happy? I mean, he's really not happy. And that this is a signal that this is the beginning of the end for him, at least with the Patriots.
I mean, I'll say
You pushed back, by the
I know
way.
we touched on the Netflix thing a little bit last time I was on,
Right.
so I won't rehash that over again. But I do, to your final point, I do think that the way this whole season has played out increases my belief that Tom Brady will be elsewhere after this season, whether that be retired or whether that be playing for another team. I still think retirement is a much stronger chance than him going and playing anywhere else.
Really?
And I still don't think that either of those are the likely outcome. I think if you were kind of ranking the choices that Tom Brady can make, I still think remaining in New England and continuing to play for the Patriots is the number one most likely possibility by a considerable margin. That's just my read on the situation. But with the way this whole season has played out, I do think it's increased increased the chances of him not being here next year, if only because he's now kind of realizing what it might be like if the Patriots offense remains on this kind of current track.
Right. And Bill's up there smiling. Hey, man.
Yeah, it's just if he
all right.
Maybe he does, and maybe he'll kind of get over his current frustration and be okay with this moving forward. Or maybe he's just decides, I don't fully have it anymore, or the players around me aren't kind of at the level that I want to be putting myself through all this work and all this whatnot for. I don't know. I just overall, the chances of Tom Brady not being here next year, in my mind, are higher now than they were at the beginning of the season, just with the way this whole thing has played out.
Now, I want to know, because again, you're there now, but you've been there in the past, and we've had social media, we've had Instagram has kind of taken off, and I know I'm an old guy, so I'm not on Instagram, and so I'm missing a lot of this stuff. But what about Brady liking the AB stuff and Edelman liking that kind of stuff? I mean, to me, again, I'm an outsider, but man, that looks like the Netflix stuff. When you're liking stuff, Tom knows that people are going to see that. And he knows the notorious nature of an Antonio Brown and what's going on. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
yeah,
what do you think about that?
It's kind of a weird look. I mean,
Right.
You've seen it a lot with Tom Brady. Yeah. Liking the Antonio Brown Instagram posts. And then even the one that Brown had, I believe it was last week or last weekend, where he apologized to the Patriots and basically made kind of one last gasp effort to come back
right after the press conference.
A lot of players from the team ended up liking that post, and it's difficult to read into things on social media, especially because a lot of these guys have teams running their Instagrams anyway. But yeah, it's a strange thing that, because as you mentioned, Tom Brady's a savvy guy. He knows that
the evidence is mounting. I'm building a case here, Zach.
Yeah, I mean, he knows that people are going to be talking about these things. I mean, everything that Tom Brady does becomes a storyline, and he knows it. He's been in the spotlight for 20 years now. It's odd that somebody hasn't just been like, all right, Tom, like, let's just, like, if you feel that way, just like shoot him a text or something like that. Just for anything, just to kind of keep the buzz down, keep the social media heat down. But I don't know. Do people ask him about the likes? It's a weird. What was that?
Have people asked him about that like stuff, the liking things?
Karen Guregian from the Boston Herald actually talked to him about it briefly. I believe it was last week, and he didn't get too deep into it. He was kind of like, "Oh, I didn't actually read the message.
What's wrong with that?
I just like the picture. I'm just like a happy guy."
Right. It's the Netflix thing, dude. It's the Netflix thing.
I mean, I don't think there's anything like too backhanded about it or kind of devious about it.
It's not passive aggressive.
Like, I don't know. I know Tom Brady and Antonio Brown got along well when Brown was here. I know he thought that Brown was a good player for the Patriots and would have been a good player for the Patriots. Sounds like he wasn't particularly happy that Brown was let go and not brought back. But yeah, I don't know. It seems like an unnecessary storyline for him.
Right. And it's got to be tough. I mean, when you're there and you need access and you're dealing with these guys all the time, it's got to be very difficult. And I think sometimes it's good to have a-holes like me come in and say, look at this. Come on. It doesn't smell right. Last thing. All right. Last thing. This is it. I'll let you go. Don Yee. Where the hell is Don Yee now? And where has he been for like 20 years with his Tom Brady's agent? Is he Tom Brady's agent? I mean, how is that guy? I mean, Drew Rosenhaus, you can't swing a dead cow without hitting that guy. With the Patriots, he's got like 19 guys on the team. But what's Don Yee's role? Is there any role? Is Tom running everything?
No, I'm pretty sure Don Yee has a pretty significant role. He just I guess he just handles his business a little bit differently than some of the other agents. I guess
he's very quiet guy. He's a great guy, by the way.
He's definitely not a Rosenhaus or a Scott Boras or those types that'll be on SportsCenter every week and kind of out in the media. I know he tends to be a pretty difficult guy to get a hold of for media members. But yeah, I guess that's just the way he's run his business, and he's been pretty fortunate, I guess, to have Tom Brady. I think he had Jimmy Garoppolo as well, so he's doing pretty well for himself.
The reason this is probably the whole conversation. Maybe not as weird as Netflix, but I'm saying to myself over the summer, I'm hearing reports, well, Tom Brady's going to play out his contract. I'm like, stop what? Tom Brady's playing for a contract? Wait a minute. I mean, again, that's like a monster disconnect. And then we hear, well, he gets along with Bob Kraft so well and all these things that none of them really jibe. I'm trying to figure it out. And I'm also thinking to myself, and just as an outsider, Jesus Christ, if you're going to give somebody a lot of money just to give it to them, do it. And if they're not giving him that money, or they're not giving him that gold watch kind of situation, why aren't they? The guy that's smiling after the Eagles game, Bill Belichick, right? And then Brady's throwing a tantrum. So that's is it weird, his contract situation right now? Should it be different, or am I overreacting as usual?
I mean, it's noteworthy for sure. I mean, he got a quote unquote extension this past offseason, but those
incentives and all this stuff.
So he basically essentially is in a contract year right now, unless he and the team come to a new agreement before the start of the league year. He'll be a free agent in March for the first time in his entire career. So it's
unbelievable.
That fact alone makes this notable. And I understand it from a Patriots perspective of, this guy's going to be 42. Maybe we don't want to lock him up until he's 45, especially because you can't say Brady is declining, because people freak out about that around here. And I still think he is in the upper echelon of NFL quarterbacks. But as I mentioned before, he hasn't looked like an MVP this season, and he has taken a step back, I would say. So maybe the Patriots, it makes sense that they might not want to kind of tie themselves to that guy for another 2 to 3 years, but it's also Tom Brady, and you can make the argument that if anybody deserves kind of a legacy contract.
But Bill Belichick doesn't operate that way.
Bill Belichick does not operate that way, and which is why this offseason is going to be fascinating in New England. Unless the Patriots, unless he and the Patriots do come to some sort of deal before that, free agency with Tom Brady is something that we've never seen around here. So that's going to be, as I mentioned, fascinating.
I think everything that we've talked about, going round and round, because I've been going crazy today, Bill Belichick's the answer. That's where you're going to find the answer. And I think when you look at how pragmatic he is, the weird situation with Brady, this is one of the greatest athletes in the history of the United States of America, Tom Brady, and he's kind of getting the runaround with the contract. But when you see Bill Belichick want to sign Antonio Brown, he just wants to win. He doesn't care. He doesn't care if you're the George Washington of sports, Tom Brady. Sorry. That's how we got here in the first place. I think the Antonio Brown thing, that they would bring him in, really speaks to the pragmatism of a guy like Belichick, which then speaks to how he's treating somebody like Brady, which to me makes no sense. But what, by the way, what's going on with the New England? Is that a New England Free Jacks hat? What do you have on there?
Oh, yeah. It's the new professional rugby team in Boston.
Rugby?
I've played rugby for the last 10 years. I'm a big rugby fan. And there's the new professional team, new professional league's got a team in Boston starting up in February. So very exciting.
So how did you get the hat?
I've done some work for them. They were getting themselves off the ground within the last last year or two. So I've been helping them out with that. But yeah, they start up right. I think it's the week after the Super Bowl. So trying to capitalize on that post-Patriots lull.
Wow, man. Well, thank you so much for your patience, man. And I really appreciate you, taking all of my questions and observations and just going round and round, because I mean, the Patriots are so ever present. America's team, that is America's team.
Mm.
And there's so many seemingly disconnected situations that talking to somebody who's boots on the ground like you is so valuable. So I can't thank you enough for coming on.
Yeah, of course. I always love chatting with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Have a good one.
That's Zach Cox of NESN, the New England Sports Network, for the over 50 crowd like me, right? When you're doing broadcasting, well, you can't say the same thing over and over again. You just can't keep saying NESN. You got to call it NESN or New England Sports Network or whatever, That's how it works. But I really appreciate, we have some amazing guests. What's really cool about this show, and I thank everybody at Fancred, they play a big role in this, of course, with Fancred being in Boston, the HQ there. The fact that we're able to get such great guests coming out of New England and really giving us amazing insight into the Patriots is phenomenal. We get it 2-3 times a week. So if you want to know what's going on in Boston, and this is going to transition, because then we're going to go to the Celtics, and I'm really excited. Not the Bruins. I'm a hockey guy, but we're going to talk Celts. We're going to talk about the Boston Celtics. I think the Celtics are going to be the story of this season before it's all over. When they get Hayward back, I'm not so sure about Kemba. Is it going to be amazing? But I do think that the Celtics are coming out of the East. So it's very exciting what's happening in Boston right now between the Pats. You got all the crazy gossip, the soap opera. And let me just say this. This reminds me a little bit of my spiel about Jerry Jones yesterday. The problem with the Cowboys, right, is the one constant through the last 30 years when they've sucked. Okay? What's the one constant? Sometimes they're better. Sometimes they make the playoffs, right, here and there. But in the end, they always underachieve. In the end. If they even get to the point where you would say, wow, they're underachieved. What's the one constant? Jerry Jones talking to the media, undermining the coaching staff, confusing the loyalty of the players. That's the constant. That's the endemic root of the problem with the Cowboys. Obviously, I can just imagine somebody from like Bangladesh who comes over here, right? And they're looking at the Cowboys after the Patriots game, and they're saying, is that the coach who's talking in the locker room right now? Who's throwing the special teams coach under the bus? Who's throwing the offense under the bus? The coaching staff? Really? That's not the coach. Oh, it's the owner. Wow. Do all the owners? Oh, none of the owners do that? If you're like from India or something, or wherever, you're like Iceland, could be anywhere, right? You're like, so this is the only team that has this owner, and he always does this year after year, right? And they always underachieve. Now, let's look at the Patriots, okay? Because I think it's excusable for the local media not really to see it or want to see it or want to deal with it because they need access. I'm not saying that you certainly have some very opinionated people who aren't afraid to step on toes there. I think there's an element of Bill Belichick just doesn't give a shit what talk show hosts think in Boston. Clearly, that's a good thing. That's what I would want my coach doing, approaching the media. Doesn't care. Say whatever you want. Doesn't matter. But if you've got to go in there every day, right, you're dealing with somebody like a Belichick where there are no individual identities in that organization, save, Brady. It's about it now. I mean, it hasn't always been that way. But so when you look at what Brady has been doing this year, and I went through it with Zach, it's like the Jerry Jones thing. Really, he liked the Antonio. I mean, Antonio Brown, you talk about a mess. You talk about a miscreant, a crazy person. And I recognize he's a great football player. And that's what Tom cares about. That's all he cares about, just like Belichick, right? And I do think in this situation, they're on the same page. Now, they're not on the same page with Kraft because Brown threw Kraft under the bus, which is why Brown had his agent write up a tweet and say, I apologize. You think that just came out of nowhere? Drew Rosenhaus just did that? No. He probably got it either from Brady or more likely Belichick. Some, combination of that kind of communication. So when you look at what Brady's done in particular, the complaining about the offense, and they're 9-1, and they just beat the Eagles. Say what you will about the Eagles. That's a hell of a win, as Zach Cox just pointed out, right? So, and by the way, coming up, we're going to talk. This is going to be fun. A lot of fun. Well, I shouldn't say that, right? It's not all about Schadenfreude, but we're going to talk Raiders and Rams coming up with Vinny Bonsignore of the Las Vegas Review-Journal. And, but when you're standing up there and telling me, oh, I had no idea that people might connect me coming out of a rub and tug in a strip mall in the middle of the season on a show on Netflix to Bob Kraft. I had no idea. What? That's okay. Jerry Jones is the only owner who does this, and he's been doing it for 30 years, and the Cowboys suck every year. It's the same principle, right? You've got to kind of step back. And when you step back, you see when Tom Brady is liking something that Antonio Brown is doing, right? I mean, he's on the same page with Belichick there, but he's not with Kraft. Is he on the same page with Kraft with Netflix? No. Is his contract getting jerked around and Bob Kraft is ultimately responsible for that? Yes. Now, I have no doubt Bill Belichick is the reason that Brady is not being paid like a conquering hero. And I do think it's almost bizarre. But you know what? Bill Belichick is such an outlier in the pragmatic nature of how he does stuff. And man, he would much rather miss on you trading you too early or getting rid of you too early than too late. Because if you do it too late, you're going to suffer. The team is going to suffer, right? And everybody's going to know what happened. Now, if you cut bait too early, it's much more difficult to quantify the decision that you made there, if it's positive or negative. So, when you look at the best example of them all is talking to Zach Cox, and we've talked to Tom Curran, and we've talked to many people up in New England about the Eagles press conference with Brady. And it was so out of character, regardless of the situation, whether they were, 5-5 or 9-1. He's never done that. Never. But to do it when they've won 9 out of 10 games. Whew. Right? And then the next day, you've got this tweet from Antonio Brown that was obviously written by his agent. Oh, Mr. Kraft, I'm so sorry. So, look, wake up, smell the coffee, believe what you see with your own eyes, and hear with your own ears. That's the situation in New England. Tom Brady is eminently passive aggressive. That's what's happening. And I don't damn blame him. I really don't. He deserves more consideration. He deserves better personnel on offense. He deserves to be more of a priority. But if you're winning, now Belichick's in a great spot. And I think ultimately, maybe people aren't, and we got to, this is why I love having guys like Zach on and the insiders up there. But I'm just going to keep making up conspiracies with the Patriots. I think Belichick's kid, who you see every game, there he is. And now Bill's got the pen and paper out, right? Okay, where'd that come from? It's a little different this year with the defense. I mean, Bill's a little bit more actively involved, or maybe, well, it's always kind of been that way. Well, it's really obvious this year. And Brady's really pissed, more so than he's ever been. Okay. And maybe, just maybe, Bill Belichick is going to treat Tom Brady like he has treated every player in the history of his coaching tenure with the Patriots. He might just do that. In fact, that is what he's doing. So if he does treat Brady that way, what is he doing? He's paving the way for a transition with this team, whether it involves his son taking over the defense, maybe taking over the team eventually, who knows? I mean, maybe he's thinking that far ahead. Just like Trump is thinking about his family and the dynasty that represents. I think, by the way, I think Donald Trump absolutely. I guess Don Jr. might be next in line. And there's Eric, but I think Ivanka wouldn't surprise me if she runs, if she's the next Trump to run. And I think this is much ado about nothing, but at least in the perspective of this show, Michelle Obama, I'm starting to think that again. She's going to run. I'm really, if Bloomberg could just show up like a bump on a log, so forget about that. That's not even that interesting. That's the thing. I mean, the whole premise of Stick to Sports is it's more interesting. Do I want to talk about Hollywood for ugly people in Washington? No, not. I mean, how boring is what's going on right now with the Democrats? Jesus. I'm so I don't want to get into it, but holy cow, Elizabeth Warren, I'm sorry. You would get elected. I would get elected, I believe, before her. If that causes you to turn the show off, so be it. I just can't see it. Not that she's necessarily any worse than the other candidates, but I mean, I can't watch it. There's no one in there who's compelling. Nobody. I don't know if it's a function of the media. You know what I think it is? Why is the presidential campaign 9 years long? Why did it start like last February? Not 2019 February. No. We're looking at Elizabeth Warren trying to explain something about her ethnicity in 2018 February. It's a function of cable news. I guess. I think the thing is, it's a little bit like games in sports, right? If you, let's go to Vinny Bonsignore, the beat writer for the Raiders, was the beat writer for the Rams this year. Best guy we could possibly have on the day after that Rams debacle. And so, Vinny, now we were just having this debate, and, all we have to do is ask you, I know, but is it Bonsignore or Bonsignore?
It's Bonsignore, but I'll take Bonsignore.
And one of the reasons I said that was I'm a hopeless Anglophile from the Midwest and the suburbs and stuff, but I actually heard you, because I've heard you on several different talk shows, and somebody said Bonsignore, and I'm like driving along. Wait a minute. I had Vinny on the show, and I was wrong the whole damn time. So sorry.
All good.
So, first of all, give us an update on what's going on with you, because I know you made a transition, right? You're now working with the Las Vegas Review Journal.
Yeah, a little mid-season trade.
Amazing.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm still trying to get it all together, but living out of a suitcase. I'm back in the Bay Area right now. I was in New York with the Raiders playing the Jets. But basically, I was the Rams beat writer for the last 4 years, or since they got back to Los Angeles. But a great opportunity came up to go cover the Raiders. I have to spend the next month covering their last month of the season, or however long that it might last, and then I'll be making the full-time move to Las Vegas.
Wow.
In between January and February. So covering the Raiders and their new journey, and
that's awesome.
Embarking on their new future. So pretty exciting.
What is your reaction to? Well, I mean, we all know what happened over the weekend, but what's just your general reaction in looking at the Raiders and how things are run there, and just your overall impression of the team? I mean, because it is really an extraordinary situation for a beat guy to go from, the Rams. Now you're in a new locker room. So what was your initial reaction? What do you think so far? And of course, in viewing the aftermath of the Jets nightmare.
Yeah, it's been. Let me try to get my. There we go. It's interesting in that regard, just walking into a new locker room, and when you're a media member, and it takes time, to get to know the nuances of a team, the various levels of it, and
right.
The locker room, and so
you can't speed it up.
Yeah, it's been kind of going in sort of blind, but so far so good. Everyone that I've talked to, I've explained my situation. Derek Carr's and Richie Incognito and some of the other players, and they're all cool. Welcome aboard, and excited to have you around. And one thing that I can see so far, at least with the Raiders, is I think they have a pretty healthy understanding of where they really are in the whole NFL pecking order right now, in terms of where they are as a roster, where they are as a viable playoff contender. They've overachieved in some cases to get where they are. They're now 6-4 going into Sunday. Obviously, they were they're 6-5 now, but they were 6-4 and pretty well positioned to make a playoff run. But I think there's an honesty in that organization right now about where they really are. And
now, is that Mayock, you think, or is it Gruden,
everybody,
or where's that the team? I mean,
everybody, all the way from the top. They appreciate where they are right now, and how they've maybe overachieved a little bit to get where they are. But I think that they totally understand they're not going to get caught into any sort of a trap thinking we've arrived at all. I mean, they have 5 picks of the first 90 draft picks next year. In April, they have $75 million or so, $70 million to spend under the salary cap. This is all pointing toward the future. This is great experience that they're getting right now, including the loss to the Jets on Sunday. There was a learning experience in that. They didn't show up in a lot of ways, and some adversity hit early on in that game. A couple calls didn't go their way, a missed field goal. And all of a sudden, they're kind of hanging their heads a little bit, feeling sorry for themselves a little bit. And we saw what the result of that was. So I think the good and the bad that's going to happen from this point to the end of the season, I think are all things that they're going to be able to lean on and learn from.
Besides John Gruden, and the commitment that Greg Davis made to John Gruden was pretty extraordinary, and that's the number one topic of conversation. After that is Derek Carr. Mm-hmm. And is Derek Carr going to go to Vegas, right? And is John Gruden, is that his guy? And we know John Gruden is obsessed with quarterbacks, right? He's a quarterback whisperer. Where are we with Derek Carr right now?
A couple of things. I think John Gruden has learned and grown and evolved, over the years. Is Derek Carr the quarterback of the future? I think right now he is. He'd have to be. There's no real contingency plan, behind him, unless you're just going to absolutely invest a high draft pick next.
Now, how high do you foresee them? I mean, they've got a lot of picks. We know what their pick will probably be, and it probably won't be that high. But are they in a position, you think, to take a quarterback that maybe could be an heir apparent?
I think what's more likely is, I think they understand what they have in Derek Carr. I think they have a pretty good idea of what kind of quarterback he is and what he's capable of doing, especially with a better supporting cast around him. I think that, and I have a sense that within their organization, they understand the importance of just building around him. I'll use Jared Goff as an example. A lot of people are piling on Jared right now.
Like me.
But the fact of the matter is,
right.
With a good offensive line and a good supporting cast.
Yeah, it's a disaster, the offensive line.
Right. And there's injuries. There's guys that didn't step up in roles that the Rams were expecting them to. There was a bit of a back step that Andrew Whitworth took, that Rob Havenstein took. So there was a lot of that's gone into the offensive line that has really sort of sabotaged Jared Goff. And you have to also talk about Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley is not the Todd Gurley that we remember. That's just flat out the truth. Go ahead.
Take us back to last year and the contract and Gurley, and he's Superman, and then he isn't. I mean, have you thought about, obviously you have. You're there. How do you go from Superman and the money, and then it's not there anymore? Here's the thing that makes it so tough, Vinny, for me personally watching this is, Jesus, he looks great there. So what happened there? Is there any way we'll ever know? Does Todd even know? He knows he's hurt, I guess, but what really happened there?
Yeah, I think that as complicated as we try to make it to be, it probably really isn't all that complicated.
Right.
I think that he's not physically as fit as he was heading into the last part of last year. And I think that the Rams are trying to do everything that they can to try. Now,
is this chronic knee, you think, or chronic situation? Is that what we're talking about?
It sure seems like that's what it is. There's been a lot of smoke with that. Nobody's ever come out and officially verified it. You're not going to get anybody to officially verify it. This is you've got privacy issues that you're dealing with when it comes to injuries and things like that. So I don't think we're ever, at least now anyway, going to get a full definitive answer on that. But I think it is as simple as he's just not where he was physically, and it's everything when it comes to sports. If you're not there physically, then you're not there, and you're not going to be the same player. And the Rams can't use him as they did in the past. They can't rely on him as they did in the past. And I think that trying to figure that out of how do you use a guy that you're not going to be able to use as you were the last 2 years has been a real challenge for the Rams. I think we've seen it play out on the negative all year long. Visiting
with Vinny Bonsignore of the Las Vegas Review-Journal, beat writer for the Raiders, but of course covering the Rams over the last 4 years for The Athletic, making the transition right in the middle of the year. So couldn't have a better person on right now for an assessment of the Rams. And you mentioned it from the outset. This is my opinion. And I think it plays into everything. It plays into Goff. It plays into Gurley to a certain extent. The offensive line. Is that offensive line fixable? What has to happen? What is the problem right now with the offensive line for people who don't know? And what has to happen for them to get that thing back to where they had it last year and they were high flying?
Yeah, it's a difficult question in that they still don't really know what they have in Joseph Noteboom, who started the year at left guard. He was a guy that they drafted in the third round in 2018 at TCU. They had all the confidence in the world that he was going to be able to lock down left guard position. There was still always going to be a learning curve going from a guy that hasn't started to now all of a sudden he's starting and playing a position that he didn't play in college. He was a tackle in college. So there was a transition. I think it was a slow transition. But then right early on, he gets hurt. We don't know what Joseph Noteboom would have been 11 games into the season. He didn't have that. The Rams didn't have, don't have the luxury of being able to assess that. And then Brian Allen, gets hurt 3 weeks ago. There's the center who they drafted in the fourth round and felt was capable of replacing John Sullivan. He goes down. I think in the perfect world, even with whatever struggles were going to eventually or inevitably happen when you put young offensive linemen in there, I think in the Rams' perfect world, they would be sitting here on January 1st, being able to look back at a full season of Joseph Noteboom and Brian Allen, and then be able to look at, okay, they struggled, they got better, or maybe they didn't get better. They'd have a better idea of what they would have January 1st with a full season of those two players. But now they're not going to have that luxury. So how do you assess that? Do you give them another chance next year as healthy players? I think
Do you think visiting with Vinny Bonsignori of the Las Vegas Review Journal? We're going to let you go here in a moment, Vinny, but I wanted to ask you, and I know you've seen these guys, are the 49ers the real deal ultimately? And I think the question is, especially on offense, are they the real deal?
Flock right now with the offensive line. You have some question marks at the offensive line.
Right.
I do think they're going to have to invest some money into whether it's a free agent or a high draft pick to try to add some talent. But it's not the easiest thing. The offensive lines take time to develop, and the Rams were the beneficiaries of some really good fortune the last 2 years. No injuries. It was basically the same five guys, game in, game out, and they were good. And there was continuity. They're not having that this year. Too many injuries, too many young players that are just unproven, and we're seeing that.
So you're going to be staying in a suite in the Wynn, right, when you move to Vegas? Is that how it's going to work? The Encore, the Venetian, is that where we're going to be staying?
Well, one good thing about it, and it's funny because I had a lot of Ram players who were like, you're going to see this much more money on your checks because there's no salary, there's no tax. It goes so much further. The money goes so much further. So we're kind of looking at maybe Henderson, Summerlin. There's some nice areas that I've learned in the greater Las Vegas area that you're still in Las Vegas, but you don't even feel like you're necessarily in Las Vegas. So that's kind of where we're looking at.
Dude, that's going to be a fun adventure, and I can't thank you enough for jumping on. Man, it's a busy week. Thank you so much for the time, Vinny.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me.
That's Vinny Bonsignori. We got his name right this time. Great job by Cam Smith working with Vinny to get him on the show. Man, what a great show already. Deep diving. We really pushed. It was like a full court press on Zach Cox. We got to get this information. Dude, if you're gambling or whatever, this is the place. We're getting you that hot information, the hot sheet, here on Fancred. We do it every Monday through Friday. We're going to be off for Thanksgiving, going to be off for Friday, right? While we're all on lockdown, Black Friday. But we'll be back. And of course, the week's not even, what am I talking about? We're going to be back. We're going to be back tomorrow. We're going to be back right now. But Vinny's great, though. And Bonsignore. That's awesome. What a great name. So where were we? We were talking about like Chris Christie, right? And so if you're just tuning into Sports by Brooks on Fancred, you're like, Chris Christie? What? Why would you talk about that guy? That guy? Right? The guy that shut down the bridge and then lied about it? Wow. Chris Christie, one of the more, for me personally, detestable people walking around right now. And so we have a clip. I really don't want to play it back. I really don't, because I can't take it. I'm so triggered by Christie making crap up. To me, right there, we have a clip of the ex-governor of New Jersey. Let me explain. And he's at yesterday a reunion, from what I understand. It's on the Rutgers YouTube channel, and I'm surprised it hasn't come out yet. It might not. We may have to put it out. Okay? I found it through a source. We got the best sources. You got to be here every day. And Chris Christie basically is outing himself as the guy who blocked Schiano's hire. That's what it looks like to me. Cam Smith, our producer, I know I was talking over it the whole time, but doesn't that look like there's a really good chance that Chris Christie stuck his big fat you-know-what right in the middle of the situation and messed everything up? Look, am I right? Am I, by the way, I want to back up a little bit. Am I a Schiano guy? Hell no. But look, number one, and there's no sort of equivalency here. It doesn't exist. It does not exist. But the whole thing was Schiano and Sandusky. Did Schiano know? Yes, he knew. He's lied and denied it. McQuarrie, under oath, in a deposition, said that Tom Bradley, who was on the staff of Joe Paterno's football program for over 40 years, told him that Schiano told him in the early 90s that he saw Sandusky in a shower with a child. Schiano has denied he's ever said anything. Now, he might not remember, okay? But for him to come out, Schiano has come out in the aftermath. That happened in 2016 and said, oh, I didn't know anything. I didn't say anything, nothing. Look, I don't believe him, because if you were there at the time, it would have been impossible to not, totally impossible. That's the sad part about all this, folks, is that, I mean, just look at my timeline. The last 3 days, is it still going? Are there still people screaming at me? I mean, we're going to have them on this show tomorrow. I want to find out who these actual people are. And these are real people. These are Paterno sycophants, crazy people. And what set it off was, I'll read you a couple of my tweets that set this off. Dude, I don't know. This is like 2 days ago. And I didn't follow it up because there's nothing to follow up. You don't want me to follow it up because I have all the facts. But so what happened was, it was because of Schiano. So I started off tweeting about Schiano. And in the process of doing that, I mean, the point was, this was Monday. This was, what is this, Tuesday? Yesterday. Word comes out yesterday that Rutgers is not going to hire Schiano, which is stupid. You know, again, am I a Schiano fan? Of course not. But if you're Rutgers and you know anything about that football program over the last 20 years, you know the only guy breathing right now who will give you a chance to be competitive, right, is Greg Schiano, because he's done it. And he's a good recruiter, regardless of what you're going to hear in the media. There's people out there saying right now he's not a good recruiter. He was the Big Ten Recruiter of the Year for 24/7 Sports, which is the #1 overall recruiting service that there is. This is 2018, last year, Schiano was. So, I mean, you can understand why all the misinformation's out there, because you got bloviators like, what is Chris Christie doing? You know, what does he have to do with anything? He's not the governor. And by the way, what's the governor have to do with it, even if he's a sitting governor? Because the big point about that video and what Christie was saying, and I didn't really get to say it. I know Vinny came on as I was going crazy. I mean, I went nuts when that video was playing. Is Christie doesn't understand how a college athletic department in the Power 5 conferences works. He does not know clearly, fundamentally. He's saying that taxpayer money in New Jersey would have gone because Schiano wanted time on a private jet for travel for whatever reason, family, whatever. That's standard. That's normal. And it's not, oh, I get a jet, I'm John Bon Jovi, right? That's not what this is. It's not Led Zeppelin, all right? Or it's not Drake, okay? This is, you're going to be allotted a certain number of hours, and it's a standard thing. It's a standard thing. And it's from donors. It's not coming from student fees, and it's not coming from taxpayers. That's a lie. Just like I would be willing to bet you that Christie doesn't even know that athletic scholarships at Rutgers, right? Those are private donations that fund those athletic scholarships, and all athletic scholarships are private donations. And that's by design. That's by design, especially for what Christie kept bringing up. This is a public school, right? They're private donations for everything pretty much that runs a college athletic department, beyond the revenue that Rutgers isn't getting until 2027. That insanity, because the Big Ten is, screwing them. So, I mean, donors are everything. And it's not like, I mean, the whole deal is it sets up for Schiano. If you know anything, you don't have to know that much about college sports, right? The whole deal, it's fine. It's not, I mean, Schiano wants a better facility, a new facility. Rutgers is a joke compared to everybody else. I'm not saying that everybody should be building facilities, and I'm not saying that private donors should be funding all this crap, right? Because the reason they're doing it, especially at public schools, is that if it's private donations set up by a charity, right, they're not subject to FOIA from the media, right? So you can't get a lot of the financial and whatever they're doing, doesn't matter, because that's and this is basically the booster club. Like when you hear football boosters, what does that mean, right? What it means, and it's a standard thing across all schools. I mean, the last school that wasn't doing it in the Power Five was Florida State, and they finally, transferred their booster club into a private charity, right? And it's the Florida State Athletic Association. Well, everybody has that in the Power Five schools. Doesn't matter if you're a private school or a public school. And it's that organization that is the football boosters. It is a business, right? And it's through donations to that business that athletic scholarships are funded. It's not attached directly to the school. If it was attached directly to the school, right, then the media could find out what was going on, find out what's happening. But because it's private, the boosters can do whatever they want. They can move money around and whatever. And so it's essentially a function. I mean, it's not a dirty little secret. I mean, it's a function of the largesse you're getting from the television rights deals. And if you've got a guy like Les Wexner, who's the richest man in the state of Ohio, as your whale donor super booster at Ohio State, you're in good shape. You're going to get a new facility about every 3 or 4 years. Les Wexner, Jeffrey Epstein's good buddy, by the way. Les Wexner, the number one booster at Ohio State, has been for the last 40 years. His name, I was watching the Ohio State game over the weekend, and I mean, they venerate these people so over the top. It's so ridiculous, but there's Les Wexner's name right next to the scoreboard. It's like his name's not in enough places on campus. It's like on the hospital, the medical center, the bus stop, it's actually on the football facility. And I think I told you on this show a couple of months ago, Les Wexner, the booster at Ohio State, his name's on the football facility at Ohio State, right? Because Jeffrey Epstein donated $5 million to Ohio State to put it there. Did you know that? Well, if you listen to this show, you watch this show every day, you do. Or if you're watching right now, you do. So I'm going down this rabbit hole just to educate you, because why would you know these things if you're not? And what's ridiculous is you're in the same boat as the media. 9 out of 10 media members, I think more than that, like 9.5 out of 10, they don't know this. I'd be willing to bet you there's guys covering Power 5 teams right now on the beat, whatever it is, national guys, talk show hosts, absolutely, who have no idea that all of the scholarships that you see for the University of Alabama are private donations. And they're not subject to oversight from the state of Alabama, even though the University of Alabama is the flagship public institution in the state, right? It's a workaround. So they can do whatever they want. That's why you see the largesse on the football program. And there's absolutely no accountability. They can do whatever they want. That's the way it's set up. And that's the way everybody does it. And so now let's thank you for the reminder, by the way, Cam. And now Cam just like, oh, dude, Cam Smith, our producer, great guy, does a great job on top of things, keeps me under control. It's not easy. We're going to wrap it up. But now let's go back. This is it. Home stretch to Chris Christie. What did I just tell you? I told you that everything is private donations. And Chris Christie, on that video, when he was citing Schiano not getting hired, was saying Schiano wanted all this stuff and it's taxpayer. No, it's not. You're a liar. It's not so much he's a liar. He just doesn't know. And he's the guy at the dinner table who shoots his mouth off and has no idea what he's talking about. That's the governor, the ex-governor, that shut down the George Washington Bridge, right? And ran for president. And pulls his pants up to his neck. That's going to do it for today. Tomorrow, we're going to have Maurice Clarett, former Ohio State Buckeye. You know who he is. Number 13, right? And some other surprises. I'll guarantee you. Damn, we didn't use the Joel Embiid thing. Can we run that clip? You want to run that clip? We got like a minute or two here. Joel Embiid of the Sixers last night, Philadelphia, right? Scored. He didn't score. No points. 0. Played the whole game. And so we put together a little video, a little Photoshop. Have we run that yet?
He caught it.
Here we go.
There he was.
And I actually have a breakdown, but this is my Photoshop. This is the old Wilt Chamberlain picture where he scored 100 points. Ah, there's Brooks. I was up all night.
Ran
it took
their
like
normal
7 hours to do
for Embiid to try to get him to the elbow.
This
and
is a
every
breakdown
time
of
he caught
Embiid's
it there,
game.
He was surrounded by help defenders. Look at the
It's
bodies
wrong.
that the Raptors surround him with. He ends up settling for this mid-range jumper.
There's Drake. And Drake was taunting Embiid.
Later in the quarter, the
during the
Sixers
game.
run the same
So
play
this is a
again,
breakdown
but Embiid has the defense in his head and
of
takes
Embiid.
a quick mid-range J. Later in the fourth, when the Sixers need a bucket, they run that down screen from Simmons for Embiid again. He's so rushed and panicked that he tries to bully into
Rushed
the
and
move,
panicked.
commits an offensive foul.
There it is. Here's my handiwork right here. It took way too much time. It took like 6 hours last night. Ridiculous amount of time in Photoshop. I just love that stuff. Artist at heart. So great job by our producer, Cam Smith. That's going to do it. We're live from Los Angeles every weekday, Monday through this week, Wednesday. We'll be back next week on Monday. One more day to go, though. We'll be here tomorrow, beginning at noon Eastern time. And for Cam Smith, our producer, this is Brooks Melchior saying so long. This has been Sports by Brooks on Fancred.